I just don't understand why Duggan would do this. Like, it's terrible optics. Like right now we're in the midst of a corruption investigation in city council that, in addition to Spivey, is looking into Janae Ayers and Scott Benson. All three of them are Duggan allies. Like, they're the only people on them, and Leland consistently voted with the mayor.
Those who are prosecuted under the Mann Act are Jack Johnson and Chuck Berry. As a matter of fact, Jack Johnson was the first person to be prosecuted under the Mann Act. Chuck Berry, even Charlie Chaplin was charged and convicted under the Mann Act. So it does raise or rankle legal feathers given its history. However, it appears that that's precisely what was happening with R. Kelly. He was
Well, hello, everyone. You are with Urban Interest, and I am your host, Angela Matthews. My goodness, it's Wednesday. Some people call it Hump Day. Some people call it wacky. Some people call it wonderful. But whatever it is, we're into Wednesday. Listen, we have great stories as well as guests. Councilman Andre Spivey over there in the Detroit area. What's going on, Councilman? As well as we'll talk a little bit more about Haitian immigrants, and then COVID-19 and its impact regarding the Hispanic population. This election is very important, so we'll continue to speak on that. Hot on the trails of the current mayor is the contender, Anthony Adams. What's going on with that? As well as then we'll talk about the verdict that was handed down regarding R. Kelly. Pretty hot topics today, as well as phenomenal guests, so you stay put, stay connected. We will be right back.
Movies, documentaries, TV shows, local, national, and world news, history and culture. No one tells your story better than UIN because we are you. With us, you can become more than a consumer. You become a keeper of the culture. Go to uintv.net. Pick a channel to support and subscribe today. Do it now.
Can I ask you a question? Why did you get vaccinated?
I'd like to go to these school dances and spring break to have fun.
I want to be in person for college next semester.
I want to get out of this pandemic.
I wanted to protect the people around me.
Why did you get vaccinated?
Because I'm really looking forward to hanging out with my friends.
I just want to go to a show, dance around, not have to worry about anything, feel like I'm free again.
So we can not miss out on the best years of our life.
All right, let's get to the story about Detroit City Councilman Andre Spivey pled guilty to bribery charges in a federal court on yesterday. Get this, he admitted to accepting $35,000, lots of money, from a towing contractor to help him get a lucrative deal from the city. Spivey is expected to resign today, since the council seat cannot be held by a convicted felon. Spivey's attorney, Elliot Hall, says a member of the towing community worked as an informant to help convict Spivey. Gotta watch who you're talking to. It is the second time in less than a year that a sitting council person has been removed for misconduct.
That should be our mantra today in our city. Now, Bill Gates warned us, the latter part of the 20th century, that in the 21st century, knowledge would be the key factor in our country and the largest expenditure in the United States, knowledge. We have some work to do. Now, we have a great system here, new leadership doing a great job, but there's still some challenges. It's fundamentally wrong when our children, every 3 or 4 years, change in leadership, and they're further and further behind, yet with a new plan. It hurts our heart, disheartening to know that we put the world on wheels. We manufactured this country with our cars, and we didn't have the talent pool to bring Amazon's second headquarters. We have work to do. Now, the late Canadian-born actress and social activist, Miss Mary Pickford, she said this: "If you want to go forward, the past cannot be changed, but the future is yet in your power." We have some work to do. There's some children waiting for you and I to go forth and to mentor them, not just stop by the school, but to mentor them, build relationships. And if we're going to go forward, Detroit, prepare all of our residents, both young and old, for the future coming forward.
I'm going to tell you, you're an elected official. The light is always on you. How could people think that they're going to get away with certain things? You're going to have to pay the Pied Piper at some particular time. Now you're disgraced, your name and your family. Is it worth it? So we'll get to our next story. In the last week, we have been bombarded with images of Haitian immigrants seeking a better life in America. You saw that where the immigrants were at the Del Rio, Texas border, and the atrocity that happens there. We witnessed them being beaten with whips by border security on horseback and crammed on planes and deported. But what we haven't seen and what you haven't seen are images of the perilous journey they had to make and what they took to get to the US border. We'll show you that video right now.
Ahora con un poco dólar. Con un poco dólar, pero y eso no me hace nada, pero al mi destinativo, pero me va a Estados Unidos.
Bien, Dios, porque si não tem Deus, não chega aí. Não chega aí, porque Deus está ajudando muito. Que tem algum que não chega aí, está doente, enfermo.
As you can see there, one of the Haitian immigrants trying to get to US says there he's in pain, but that won't stop him. That you have to have God, with you on this journey, I'm paraphrasing. And then you saw women with their babies, carrying them, trying to get to a better life. Haitian's unelected leader, Ariel Henry, says he agrees with the Biden administration's decision to deport thousands of Haitians immigrants. He says he is willing to cooperate and welcome back those who have fled for refuge. We will keep you abreast of that story, as well as what he has said openly about helping those who are going to be or have been deported back to Haiti. Data shows that COVID-19 took a heavy toll on the Hispanic population in Western Michigan, and there is a reason why they have fallen victim to the disease, supposedly more than any other ethnic groups in the region. Take a listen to this video.
Throughout the pandemic, the Hispanic population has continued to be disproportionately affected by COVID-19 in West Michigan. For example, about 11% of the total Kent County population identifies as Hispanic. Back in spring of 2020, the Kent County Health Department reported that the Hispanic population made up about 40% of total cases in the county.
It hurts me to know that the rate of infection in the Hispanic community is higher, disproportionate to the number of Hispanic people that live in our community.
So what went wrong? Why was this population so much more affected than others? Joanne Hoganson, Hispanic community liaison with the Kent County Health Department, says a lot of it had to do with the fact that many of them never got the luxury of working from home.
The nature of their work was they were considered essential workers, and they went to work when a lot of other people were able to stay home for the shutdown. down. And that really made a difference as to exposure.
Evelyn Esparza Gonzalez, executive director of the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan, says it also had to do with the kind of information that was provided by the state and how fast it came in.
That was a piece that was a little missing there, because when we were receiving English information almost on a daily basis, the Spanish versions were not available until a week after. And by then it was really late because things had already changed a lot.
Dr. Joni Caldoun with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services says that has now changed, and information is now provided in both Spanish and English at once.
And so we have been able to stand up not just translation services, but also just having community events in Spanish and working with important community leaders in the Hispanic community. That's been really important.
Translation services, mobile vaccination clinics in Hispanic communities, and resources being more readily available has helped bring that disparity down. The most recent data showing that in Kent County, the Hispanic population now only makes up 14% of the cases, compared to that 40% over a year ago.
All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick break, and then we will come back and we will continue to talk about the election, in particular, the mayor's election in Detroit, Michigan. So stay put and stay connected.
I couldn't breathe at all. There was lots of talk about putting me on a ventilator. I thought I was gonna die. I was 39 weeks pregnant and had a scheduled C-section. During that time, I got COVID and was hospitalized for a month. I had a blood clot in my lungs. It caused me to go into right-sided heart failure. I was really scared. I was worried that he was gonna grow up without a mom. Get your vaccine. I don't want this to happen to anybody else.
What's your emergency? Oh my God! A child just died!
Signal 13 involving a child. The medicine route.
It's time. Time to put the guns down. We've had enough. My future.
My future.
My future. Our futures are in your hands. Adults, put the guns down. Wanna play? Sleep.
Walk to school.
Visit my friends. I want to feel safe.
It's time. Time to end gun violence.
Our lives depend on it.
Adults, this is not a request.
We demand that you protect us.
Put the guns down. We have hopes. Dreams.
Goals.
Don't let a split second of anger with someone else take away my entire lifetime.
Help us live. Help us thrive.
Help us build a better future.
All right, everyone. We have been talking about the Detroit mayor's election and pretty much all of the elected positions that are up and coming in November. So therefore, this election is very important. We have with us Ms. Violet Ekonomova, who is a reporter for the Deadline Detroit. Very important voice, because they're in the media, they're reporting what we should know about and what we need to be talking about and what we need to know headed to the polls regarding people who are running for office. We got to know the platforms and the agenda. Come on in here, Violet. I'm so anxious to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
So listen, Violet, we've had two, UIN broadcast has had two mayors forums where Anthony Adams, the contender, showed up, but the current mayor, Duggan, has not showed up. Mm-hmm. Would you have any insight as to why that's so?
I have a little bit of insight, and also this is just more of the same. It was kind of this way when all types of people and groups would be hosting forums back when Duggan was running for his second term. He wouldn't show up. He only agreed to one debate. This time he has agreed to no debates. And the thought is that it's really his race to lose, that there's no benefit for him getting out in front of Anthony Adams and being asked those difficult questions about his agenda, because it could go sideways, right? So like before the pandemic, the big thing was that his administration had, in part, and with the administration before him, overtaxed Detroiters some $600 million, according to a Detroit News article. There were big events, big demonstrations around this, and then the pandemic hit and everything kind of went quiet. That would reemerge as a theme. Anthony Adams has been talking about that quite a bit. We've had infrastructure issues all summer. You have a 50-50 chance of having your basement flood with sewage every time it rains in Detroit, and yet we pay these astronomical drainage fees that we're supposed to be paying to improve our infrastructure. So he's got a lot of, while a lot of folks agree that Duggan has the city on the right track, the city is by no means good. And so he would have a lot to answer for. And that's the thought about why he won't debate. Now, he says he won't debate because of Anthony Adams's hateful and divisive rhetoric, which the jury's out on whether that's an actual thing.
Okay, so he doesn't want to debate to answer some questions that need to be answered. $600,000 overtaxing the residents. The water situation and issues, there was supposed to be monies for those particular residents that, you know, when the water situation of the crisis arose a couple of months ago, that massive flooding, I do believe, in Wayne and Oakland County. And so where's the money? Where's the money for those residents with regards to what they have lost, that damage from the water flooding? Supposed to have been released.
Right.
Do you know what happened?
I'm not sure. The federal government was handling it, but at the end of the day, regardless of if you've been paid back for those things, your basement is prone to flooding again with every severe weather event that we have. So until, like, you know, there's some sump pump installation on like every house, if they can't fix the sewage system, which you really can't for these extreme weather events. We have a very antiquated system that was built in the 1920s. So it's just a more systemic long-term problem. And then of course we have the census showing all this population loss. Duggan has promised, Duggan, when he was first running for election, said, judge me on whether I can grow the population of Detroit. And now we are 8 years into his time running Detroit, and the population, according to the census, has declined significantly. We don't know how accurate that is. Of course, there was a lot of difficulty with the census, especially during the pandemic, and there was very low participation in Detroit. But nevertheless, the population has more than likely declined. So
it's like, come on into these debates and answer these questions. So Adams addressed the mayor's disregard and said, this is what he said. He said he's focused on the issues, Adams, but has made many accusations against Duggan. Is this correct?
So you said he is.
Adams said he's focused on the issues.
Yeah.
However, Adams has also made some accusations against Duggan. And I was asking, correct.
Adams's point is that he is focused on the issues, but focusing on the issues requires holding the man responsible for some of the issues accountable. And so that is politics. So it's not, he has not been leveling personal attacks against Duggan. And when we asked the campaign for evidence of what it's describing as this hateful and divisive rhetoric, number one, they didn't respond to us. But they did respond to the exact same question from Metro Times, which is an outlet I used to work for and sometimes do work with now. And what Alexis Wiley had to say, Duggan's campaign manager, former chief of staff, she pointed to one tweet from Anthony Adams in which he said that the land bank was withholding houses from Black people, basically insinuating, you know, the land bank is racist. That is a hyperbolic statement, right? So like the land bank does not release property at the rate that many Detroiters think it should. The agency sits on tens of thousands of properties in the city. It's the largest landholder. And it releases properties at last check at the rate of like 2,000 houses per year. There's tons of reasons for why it does that. But at any rate, so you could say that it is withholding property from Black people, because if Black people are the ones interested in this property, that might be why. Now, it is not picking and choosing Black people not to give property to based on their race. So, you know, there's a gray area with that comment, but it's politics. So far worse things have been said. I mean, I would love to go back and compare Adams to Coleman Young Jr., who had Adolph Mongo as his campaign manager, who is a notorious shark. Like, there was probably far more divisive rhetoric going on in 2017, and Duggan did debate Coleman Young Jr. So, however, Coleman Young Jr. was also putting more into his campaign and perhaps doing a little bit better in the polls as of this juncture.
This is really, really heating up. So are there really any contenders in this race, Violet? I mean, you know, what is the community saying? The polls have Duggan way ahead of Adams.
Yeah.
So is there any contender?
So Adams claims, like, you remember how nobody thought Bernie Sanders was going to do anything, especially in 2016, and then he started to do something and like really give Clinton a run for her money? His path to victory there was tapping into disenfranchised voters who don't like to vote because they don't really trust anyone in government to actually represent them. And so Adams is claiming, you know, that's my path to victory. I'm reaching out to a lot of, I can't remember what, there's like a specific name for this group, but like, he's like, I'm reaching out to a lot of apathetic voters. They don't register in polls because these polls, they do only poll likely voters. However, Adams does not have a lot of money. Duggan has like more than $1 million that he had raised as of January, between January and the last filing deadline, which was maybe, I think, like July 25th, the pre-primary filing. And then Adams had like 1/10 of the money he had. And so to do that successfully, the reason people don't often go after those unlikely voters is because it is very costly. It involves a lot of engagement, and I don't know that Adams actually has the money for that. So while he may perform better than the polls are showing, Duggan's got this in the bag. And if Duggan felt he didn't have it in the bag, we'd be seeing he would use all of his money to make sure he gets it in the bag. You have to remember, this is the guy with all the corporations behind him. There's a lot riding on him being mayor again. And as a result, I'm sure that, you know, those people will throw their weight around to ensure it happens.
So what about the dark money that seems to be ads that seems to be surfacing now? And it's like, if he has it in the bag,
yes,
then why do you have to now surface with some dark money tactics in order to ensure that Duggan's going to win? If you got it in the bag and you know, it's no big deal, you're not debating, you said you won't debate because you feel there's no contender, but yet these negative ads are now surfacing.
Right. Well, what I would say about Duggan is that even in the past, when he has had it in the bag, he still goes the extra mile to ensure it's secure. He's a very shrewd politician. And one of the things, I interviewed a political analyst about this, the political analyst and pollster who came up with all these numbers we're discussing here. And he was like, I just don't understand why Duggan would do this. Like, it's terrible optics. Like right now we're in the midst of a corruption investigation in city council that, in addition to Spivey, is looking into Janae Ayers and Scott Benson. All three of them are Duggan allies. Like, they're the only people on them, and Leland consistently voted with the mayor more so than the other 4 council members who have not had their names thrown around any of this. The question becomes, why is he doing this, particularly at a time when we have this corruption probe going on in council that looks at 2 other mayoral allies, and actually we found last week is looking at dark money political groups. That was one of the things the FBI said it was looking for in its search warrant on City Hall. And one of these groups is very similarly structured to the group that Duggan is using. We can't say it's Duggan because there is not an exact trace between the mayor and this group, but one of these groups is doing attack ads against Adams, which likely the mayor has had a say in because the group is run by one current and one of his former appointees and the same lawyer for his campaign. So it makes you wonder, and this political analyst was saying, Duggan really doesn't need to be doing this, and it could actually hurt him.
Oh, wow. So speaking of polls and numbers and also investigations, Detroit Councilwoman Janae Ayers is due to the recent FBI raid. Her numbers are down. However, was anything discovered, as well as Scott Benson, that was a raid with him as well. So with these two particular persons, was anything discovered?
No, nothing. We have no idea. The feds are not saying what they seized on those raids. The feds wouldn't even say what any of this was about. We're only learning bits and pieces through various sources, and also through yesterday's guilty plea from Spivey, in which he said it was towing related. So while we don't know, and it's innocent until proven guilty, the federal government does need to meet a standard of proof in order to secure a search warrant. I mean, they need to have a serious hunch, especially when they are raiding sitting elected officials this close to their reelection campaigns. What we do know since yesterday, based on Spivey's lawyer, Spivey said that he had actually set up this FBI informant, the towing guy with 2 other council members. And so Spivey's lawyer says one of those council members was Benson. He wouldn't say who the other was, but he said it was not Ayers. So we don't know, but it's enough to make people go, huh, maybe we shouldn't have this person in office again, just in case. So she won her primary not decisively. She came very close to Young Jr. I think she was at 31%. He was maybe at 30% in a fraction. Now the latest polling has her down to 19%, which puts her in third, which means she would not win re-election. But funnily enough, the person who winds up in front of her is Mary Waters, who was involved in her own corruption problems. In 2010, she took a Rolex watch that they said was a bribe. She wound up just pleading guilty to like a tax charge for not filing the thing as a gift. But it's a dirty game in Detroit.
Gabe Leland, Andre Spivey, Janae Ayers, what the heck is going on with Detroit City Council persons? I mean, it is a given that there are strict election rules and regulations when you're campaigning, you know, reporting and all those sorts of things, that you get into a position and you think you can do what you want to do because you haven't been caught yet. Violet, what's going on?
I mean, I was saying this when we were on break. They make nearly 90 grand a year. Like in Detroit, you can live like a king off 90 grand. I don't know what you're doing with your finances that you feel you need an extra 30 grand in bribes. Like, come on now, get an accountant, just get your stuff straight. Like, I don't even understand at that point.
I don't either. And you know, we have to bring into the conversation the young state representative Joel Jones, who was on trial or had to go to trial, I do believe a week or so ago, with regards to the incident with driving while intoxicated and then name dropping. And I do believe there was a report that said that he had a key, a handcuff key that was found on his person. And they likened it to maybe he was going to do this mastermindful escape or something. Pitched it very, very derogatory towards him and negative. And yeah, I don't know, you know, he's a young man. He came into the state government about 17, 18 years old. He was very young, fresh out of school. And so I don't know, Violet, I don't know. So what's happening with the...
Yeah, I will say innocent until proven guilty. I mean, he's obviously been proven guilty here, but it's also Livingston County prosecutors, you know, they might be making a big show. I mean, the chances of Joel Jones, like he's a sitting representative. I mean, I don't think he's going in there trying to do some great escape of all the inmates. Like, I don't, unless he's like angling for like some kind of, I don't know, promotional campaign or rap career. Why would he do that? Like, he doesn't know anyone in the Livingston County jail. Like, what? I don't know. So I will say, yeah, we always have to balance accusations with like realizing who is bringing the accusations. And we know the criminal justice system isn't always great.
All right. City clerk's race. We have Denzel McCampbell that is running against Janice Winfrey. So what's happening in that race?
Janice Winfrey, I mean, she has had a lot of criticism in recent years. The thing I've always wondered about that, and there really needs to be a story or deeper dive into it, is how much of it is incompetence and how much of it is that she just doesn't have good resources, right? Like there's not a lot of money in elections in Detroit. Like, have you been to that elections office? It's not like, so anyway, there's been a lot of criticism of her, but Denzel is not really registering. People don't know who he is. He's sending out a lot of flyers. I did see one of his volunteers came to my door, but as I was talking to him, I was like, do they know, like when you're going door to door, do they know who he is? They're like, no. And like, everyone's like kind of interested in just re-electing Winfrey, but when you explain to them like how things could be different, what's at stake, when you remind them of her gaffes, you start to kind of turn them. But right now, it's the latest polling has 58% of people behind Winfrey and only 27% of people behind McCampbell, 15 undecided.
You know, what's interesting is that McCampbell is a young millennial. And when you speak with him, he seems to know the inner workings of the city clerk's position and how it can be better and what he will do for it to be better. And with technology being the way that it is, and this generation being so techie, I'm wondering how are they using it with regards to this election cycle and campaigning, because there's a lot of freebies out there that can be gotten, and you can use that to reach a wider, cast your net to a wider span of people. So I would be interested to know, how is technology being used in this particular election time? So I know you're on the ground, your boots on the ground, your ears to the ground as well. What else is going on? What other hot topics should we be aware of?
I want to stay on the city clerk race for one more second.
Okay.
It's interesting that last cycle, Garland Gilchrist, you remember Garland Gilchrist and Winfrey like ended neck and neck. Winfrey won by like a sliver. Garland asked for a recount. He was also a young millennial running on this digital stuff. And I just wonder, how did he outperform what it looks like McCampbell will perform? Because McCampbell has just as much name recognition as Garland did. Garland just worked in the Duggan administration. Nobody really knew who he was. So maybe McCampbell could learn some things from the Garland campaign. I'm not sure. He might have also had more money behind him. I've been meaning to look at their financials. What else is going on locally? Everything is just trying to figure out what is going behind this, on behind the scenes of this federal investigation right now. And I will say, we got to figure out who the second council member is who went and did this meeting. And that's my mission today, is to ask every single council member, did you meet with an FBI informant?
My goodness. Well, you know, we're going to drop the mic right there. Violet, thank you so much. Got to stay connected to you, because you are, like I said, boots on the ground as well as ears. And so we'll be interested to know other things are taking place with this race. It's only a little over a month away in November. I do believe it's what, 2nd?
Yep.
November the 2nd. Listen, there's so much is on the line. We're going to stay connected to you, Violet, so that we can know what's going on. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Violet Ekonomova she's a reporter for the Deadline Detroit. Boots on the ground as well as ears. Look her up, check her out, follow her so that you can know what's going on. This is important. This election is important. We need everyone to know what's going on. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to talk about that verdict with R. Kelly. Oh my goodness. Were you shocked? I don't know. We'll find out later. All right, everyone. We're talking about R. Kelly, that verdict. Everybody's talking about it, so we want to talk about it too. We have Attorney Bertrum Marks. He's been practicing trial lawyer for 26 years. Let me get that straight, 26 years. His practice includes products liability, medical. What was that?
28 now.
28 years?
Yes.
All right. Well, 28 years he's been practicing the law. medical malpractice, that is inclusive, corporate law, civil rights, personal injury, and white-collar criminal defense. Guess what? He serves as the chairman of the Litigation Associates trial law firm and pastor of First Community Baptist Church. You're wearing a lot of hats there, Attorney Marks, Pastor Marks. It's all good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Angela?
I'm good. This is what we're going to do. We're going to show a little clip with regards to the R. Kelly trial or scenario, and then we'll come back and then you can kind of educate us on what has truly taken place so we can understand some of these terminologies, okay?
Sounds fantastic.
All right.
Scheherazade Tillett helped lead the charge to mute R. Kelly. She's the executive director of A Long Walk Home, an organization that focuses on ending violence against girls and women. The former R&B superstar was convicted yesterday in a sex trafficking trial after decades of avoiding criminal responsibility for numerous allegations of misconduct with young women and children.
There's like a sigh of some kind of relief, but it's also bittersweet, you know, it's 20 years in the making.
Tillett says Black girls and women and their stories of sexual abuse are too often ignored.
I was watching and waiting. I saw so little visibility actually about the case itself, and I was wondering if that just mimics this whole long process for the last 20 years around how we think about Black women and girls.
Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox is a survivor of sexual abuse. She says sexual abuse wasn't openly discussed in the Black community while she was growing up.
We use terms like fast or what was she doing? There's a need sometimes to assign blame to the person who was hurt.
Fox says that's why she uses her platform to help Black girls and women who have been victims of sexual abuse come forward so she can prosecute their cases.
We recognize that being victim-centered means that we have to be aware of cultural differences, we have to be aware of barriers and remove them.
Tillett says the R. Kelly verdict gives her hope that abusers will be held accountable for their actions.
I think it's a very significant, specifically being in Chicago, where R. Kelly has had such a celebrity status, almost godlike status, that made him untouchable, right, for the last 20 years.
Will Jones, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Attorney Marks, lots have been said. So can you tell us, can you break it down for us and tell us, what was he found guilty of and what was he not found guilty of? You're muted. You're muted.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. There were 9 counts against him. The initial charge was one of racketeering, and then he was charged under the Mann Act. There were 8 separate counts under the Mann Act. He was found guilty of all of the charges that were proffered against him, which is quite unusual, but not surprising given that there wasn't a plea in this case. And these are some pretty salacious criminal accusations. What he's accused of doing, it's clear that R. Kelly, based on this conviction, is properly viewed as a very sick man. I mean, that's not by way of excuse, but that's his predatory actions, his sociopathic behavior, the way he created this environment of people around him who would help him to pretty much prey on young minds that were unsuspecting, is pretty horrific when you think about it.
So, Attorney Marks, what do you mean when you talk about what's racketeering and what is this Mann Act that you're referring to? Okay. Yes, he froze.
So racketeering is the ongoing coordinated activity to create an illegal scheme, and it's a criminal enterprise to carry out a common purpose. So that's sort of the legal definition of racketeering. It's usually associated with organized crime, and That's typically what is used when prosecutorial agencies are going after organized crime. In this case, what does it mean? It means that R. Kelly, a superstar R&B artist who had an entourage of handlers and assistants and others, and they worked with him to lure young women and, in some instances, men into fold, so to speak. Most often his hotel rooms. They lured these women in under the guise that he was going to help their career. They were typically underage, and he used his influence and his celebrity to engage in all kinds of salacious acts with them. And people, question, well, why would this parent or that parent allow this? We don't always know where our children are or what they're doing. And when you have predators out there, predators have a way of tapping into the energy of these young people and getting them to believe. So that was the racketeering aspect of the charges against R. Kelly. He was also charged with 8 counts of violating the Mann Act. Now, obviously, as an African-American attorney, a civil rights commissioner, when I hear the Mann Act, it does wrinkle my feathers, legal feathers a little bit, because of the history associated with the Mann Act. The Mann Act was brought out in the early 1900s by a legislator from Rhode Island. It was designed to prevent what they call, some people called it the White Prostitution Act. There was this belief that if a black man was with a white woman, that it was a forced situation and that he was forcing her into prostitution because white men could not handle white woman would willingly go across a state line with a black man. And I think some of the examples of those who are prosecuted under the Mann Act are Jack Johnson and Chuck Berry. As a matter of fact, Jack Johnson was the first person to be prosecuted under the Mann Act. Chuck Berry, even Charlie Chaplin was charged and convicted under the Mann Act. So it does raise or rankle legal feathers given its history. However, it appears that that's precisely what was happening with R. Kelly. He was luring these young ladies into his fold. He was convincing them that he was going to help them with their career. He was taking them across state lines. He was imposing all kinds of rules on them. He was forcing them into sexual activity that they did not necessarily want to engage in. He even gave one of the victims a sexually transmitted disease. He was physically abusive. So it didn't take this jury long to deliberate. I mean, you had 45 witnesses to come forward. You had about 6 testimony, 7 men, 5 women on this jury. I think that's significant. Not casting shade on the male gender, but we tend to look at these things less critically than our sisters who are deeply more sensitive, and rightfully so. But this jury appears to have adopted that sensitivity and came back rather quickly with a verdict of guilty on all counts. And it is just really sad. The victims, I think, are really what's most troubling. They may never recover from these incidents. They may never be able to have normal relations or a normal life after this kind of trauma. This was truly traumatizing. And the allure of celebrity is so great and it's so powerful that it should not be ignored when it comes to young, impressionable minds. And this kind of predatory activity, it just can't be tolerated.
So how much time, Attorney Marks, is he looking at?
So we're looking at a minimum of 10 years, maximum of life in prison. Don't forget that he's charged in Illinois, he's charged in Minnesota. You know, this isn't the end of trials for Mr. Kelly. He has been, quite active in his pursuits of women of all ages, but most especially minors, and it seems to be catching up with them because there are other jurisdictions that are going to prosecute. I suspect that he will receive a pretty substantial penalty out of New York, which will probably render the other convictions, if he were to be convicted in other jurisdictions, it'll probably render them, in a sense, moot. Because if he gets, 40 or 50 years in New York, and he's convicted in Illinois or Minnesota, there may be some argument to let those sentences run concurrently as opposed to consecutively, because it's not likely that a man in his 50s is going to serve 40 or 50 years and then be able to, serve another term. So it's likely that he's probably going to spend the rest of his life in prison. It's likely that convictions will follow in these other jurisdictions. The case was laid out pretty methodically, and even individuals who R. Kelly might have thought and the defense team might have thought were going to help him. One individual in particular was the minister who married Aaliyah and R. Kelly, was a reluctant witness, but nevertheless, once he took the stand and gave his testimony, it was pretty damning for Robert Kelly. I did not see a vigorous or deeply strategic defense, and I'm not sure that one exists. This was pretty substantial evidence. There were 12 acts, 8 victims, transporting these young people across state lines for sexual activity. It was a pretty straightforward case, and the jury seemed to pay attention. The jury seemed to be very sensitive to the optics of black man being accused under the Mann Act, took all of that in consideration and came out with a verdict of guilty.
Aaliyah's name was brought up. She's been gone for 20 years. In my own opinion, I felt it was very disrespectful to bring her up in this instant, in this particular situation. So why was that?
Well, when you're dealing with racketeering, you need to prove a pattern of acts. And so the reason she was brought up is because that was sort of the most well-known incident, and it set off this pattern of events. We think most of us who are deeper thinkers realize that this is a pathology that he's probably had from some sexual exploitation of him as a young person. So he's probably had it all along, but we really got introduced to this pattern of his through Aaliyah, and I believe that's why it had to be brought up. And it's unfortunate that her family feels that she didn't need to be brought into this, because there's no shame that should be attributed to Aaliyah. Absolutely no shame should be. She was a victim. She was a victim of a predator, and she escaped his victimhood because she had parents who just weren't having it. And so I don't think that it's in any way a negative or a blemish on her star. She was a victim, just like the victims of Larry Nassar, Simone Biles, and others are not diminished because they've been victimized by a sexual predator. I think it enhances their profile because it teaches us about courage and strength and tenacity. And for Aaliyah to be able to perform after this horrific event, for people like Simone Biles to be able to perform after the horrifying acts committed against her, it really speaks to an incredible sense of bravery and determination that we should admire and not stigmatize as something that is negative or somehow this is diminishing for them.
So, Attorney Marks, do you believe, legally speaking, her uncle, Blackground Records founder Barry Hankerson, finally releasing her records has any ties to this particular matter, as well as what's going to happen to his songs or his records, like Age Ain't Nothing But a Number and those particular types of songs? How will this impede his record business?
Well, that's a good question. As it relates to Hankerson, I don't have any investigative facts, and so I just won't speculate about Barry Hankerson because I really don't have any facts to support his involvement or non-involvement. I think that would remain to be seen. I will say this, that if Hankerson was involved, he likely would have been included in a round of charges for having been a participant in this racketeering in a criminal enterprise. Probably if he were involved, he would be viewed as the mastermind, having the most experience. That has not happened, so I won't speculate as to whether or not he was involved. As it relates to his financial status, it appears that R. Kelly has squandered many of his rights already. The way, contrary to what people believe, the way that an artist gets compensated is from royalties. And the artist can get a royalty every time the song is played. But if the artist is also the writer, the artist then has what are called publishing rights. And that's really where the super money is. That means that no matter who's singing the song or performing the song, whatever venue it's in, if it's published, you get compensated. It does not appear that he was very wise when it came to his publishing rights. I've read accounts that he was down to $300,000 and some odd thousand in the bank, which is just astounding to me given his catalog. It could be that he does retain rights and he can fight for and establish those rights, but surely his catalog has been diminished. Surely he won't be setting the tone for the backyard barbecues anymore. I mean, it's not something that Aunt Clara is going to be comfortable being played in the backyard of her home. I think we're going to, and I don't see radio stations flooding the airwaves with his music after this either. I think his sales and the instances of appearances of his music will suffer dramatically. Where I think he won't suffer as much are those songs that he wrote for other people, and it's not readily apparent that he was the author. I mean, he's wrote a ton of songs for other people. He was one of the most sought after producers in the industry. And I don't think that those songs are going to suffer as bad as those performed by R. Kelly himself.
There's a word that says pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before the fall. And every time someone is prideful and haughty and thinking that they are above anything, then there's definitely a fall that's coming, because it's the law of reciprocity. You get what you put out. Whatever you're putting out, it comes back to you, and it may not come back in that particular form, but it comes back. And we're seeing this in all areas: the elections, elected officials, business persons, and even celebrities. So thank you, Attorney Marks, for coming and giving us, breaking that down a little bit, because we heard a lot. Racketeering, the Mann Act. I never heard of the Mann Act. So people are wondering what is going on, and folk can reach back and bring something from the past to the present to just, basically hammer and beat somebody down with it. And so all I can say is with R. Kelly, that, his many fans will probably need to send up some prayers for him. And have you noticed anything about his fans? Are his fans speaking out in support of him and, against the verdict? What's happening with the fans?
Yeah, you have a contingent of fans that are loudly playing his music outside of the courtroom when the verdict was being announced. You have other fans who are taking to social media to defend this kind of behavior. But I think what we have to do as a community, and I heard someone say this before, two things can be true at one time. Was he a great artist in terms of what he produced artistically? Yes. Was he a sick a predator who took advantage of young minds and used his celebrity for sexual favors and deviancy? Yes, those are the facts. And what we have to do as a community is learn to be that discerning. We don't have to be all in. I don't have to say, I hate every single R. Kelly song because of this. What I will say is, it would be difficult for me having a goddaughter who is a senior in high school, who I'm very close to. It would be difficult for me to sit and listen to his music and us not have a discussion about predatory behavior and what that means and how she should avoid it, and how I can protect her from that. And I think that's where we have to grow. We have to get to the point where we're saying, yeah, I can not listen to his music because it influences people that I care about. I don't want my 3-year-old granddaughter, I don't want her growing up listening to him because of what he represents. Does that mean that I hate him? No. I like you said, I think we ought to pray for his soul, because everybody is capable of being redeemed. His redemption is a long road, and I believe that only God can redeem someone like him. But we have to make sure that we're having the conversations in our community that don't make this a stigma, that don't make this something that we just kind of brush aside and not want to talk about. We need to talk about the influence. And it's not just guys like R. Kelly. There are 28, 29, 30, 35-year-old young men who are doing well financially, who hang around high schools, who prey on young women, and who do the same thing that he did, using their status, their community status, to be predators. And we just have to be sensitive to it, and we have to make sure that we are messaging and talking about it, and that young ladies feel comfortable coming forward. It doesn't make you a bad person because you made an error in judgment. Should you have gone with him when he said, come to my hotel room? No. But the fact that you did does not mean what he did to you or what she did to you is okay, or you were somehow complicit or equally culpable. You are not. That's the message that I hope we can continually and consistently get out to the public, because it desperately needs to be out there.
All right, I just heard Pastor Marks come forth, as well as Father Marks comes forth. So thank you so much, Attorney Marks, for speaking with us today, and again, breaking all of this down, this verdict with regards to R. Kelly. We'll continue to keep our eye on it and abreast, and then we have more questions and need more breakdown, we'll definitely reach out to you. So thank you so much.
You are quite welcome. You have a great day, and the rest of your show, I hope, is as wonderful as it's been as usual.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. Listen, everyone, you have been with Pastor Attorney Bertrum Marks. As you can see, he's well versed in this particular area of the law, and we thank him so much for sticking around with us and helping us to understand what's going on. We are going to take a quick break, and then we'll wrap up this awesome dynamic segment of Urban Interest. It has been hot on this Wednesday.
At Detroit Public Schools Community District, our students reflect our legacy, seek knowledge, and inspire us every day. Magic happens in our classrooms, where we educate every student to build a stronger Detroit. Enroll today and rise up with DPSCD.
As an Olympic athlete, I prepare for everything. So when I became pregnant, I thought I was ready. But at 32 weeks, I was diagnosed with severe preeclampsia and had an emergency C-section. Looking back, had I known the warning signs, I would have talked to my doctor sooner. Too many women die of pregnancy-related complications, and most are preventable. If you or someone you know is pregnant or recently had a baby, learn the warning signs. It could help save her life. Hear her.
Today, we bring you the first part of our global broadcast exclusive conversation.
The streets of Tahrir have once again been filled.
Key issues here at the United Nations Climate Change Conference remain unresolved.
Police are saying the protesters to move further and further away.
I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining Urban Interest today. It has been an awesome and fantastic segment. We talked about the investigations going on with those council members over in Detroit, Council Member Andre Spivey, as well as Scott Benson, as well as some others that have been found guilty in some things, Gabe Leland, and just people in these elected positions. Just be honest and just abide by the rules and the laws, because nobody gets away with anything. So, and then we also talked about the Haitian immigrants, and we saw their travel from Haiti to the United States. Some didn't make it, and some were just hanging on by a string in pain, but still moving forward, trying to come into a better life. As well as we also talked about COVID-19 and the Hispanic population, as well as the election with Violet Ikonomova, who is a reporter for Detroit, that particular media, Deadline Detroit. And then we talked to Attorney Bertrum Marks. We talked about the R. Kelly verdict. So thank you for being with us. Connect with us at urban.interest, as well as on DetroitIPTV.com and our UIN broadcast. Come back with us on Friday. Great stories as well as guests. Have a great day.